All right, YouTube says we're live, and hopefully we've got audio. You give us the thumbs up once this audio starts coming through, so we know that everything's working, so we know that we are coming through on audio, that you can hear me. I appreciate that. I'm still gun shy after a couple weeks ago, when we tried it a couple times and the audio wouldn't get going for us. So we're going to start the show and just kind of assume that the audio is good. See a few people already in on the chat, and hopefully you guys can hear everything I'm saying. And if not, we'll start it again. But welcome to the Panther-Lair Show. Had to move it to Tuesday night this week because Pitt basketball has a game on Wednesday night. Panthers will be at Louisville on, there it is, Josh Newark, give us the thumbs up. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. Pitt basketball will be at Louisville on Wednesday night. So I said, well, we could either push the show and do it at like 9:15, 9:30, or we could move it back and just do it on Tuesday night and just do it now. And we'll, we can cover all the main topics. And it's not like we have a shortage of things to talk about. And I kind of, when I tweeted out about the show tonight, that, well, it's about to start, we're 10 minutes away or something, I said, I feel kind of oddly fired up. And for a Tuesday night at 8:30, I am a little bit fired up, and it's because of just everything that's been going on. And it's Pitt related, and it's college football related, and it's probably college sports related. But there's just, the game is in an interesting place right now, and I always try to be very kind of aware of when I feel like we're in a transition phase. I think culturally, I think as a society, we're in a transition phase, and we all freak out about thinking, oh, is this what life is going to be like now? Well, it's probably not. We're in a very strange time right now. We're in a time of change. We're in a transition time. It's not the 1990s anymore, and it's not quite the 2040s either. And it's going to take us a little bit to get from one to the other. That's a whole other. That's my side podcast. That's my other podcast I do under an assumed name, where it's where I just ramble about society and culture. But the reality is, college sports are in this weird transition spot right now too. And if you go back to whenever the name, image, likeness legislation started, and I'm probably jumping into this way too soon before people even have a chance to jump in and join the conversation, but I don't really want to mess around and just kind of waste time and dawdle. I mean, I should tell you about Homefield. I'm going to check out my sweet Rainbow Warriors sweatshirt. I mean, HomefieldApparel.com is the place you have to go if you want sweet Pitt gear, sweet Hawaii gear, sweet gear from tons of colleges across the country. You definitely need to go to HomefieldApparel.com, and I'll tell you more about them in a little bit. You need to go to Panther-Lair.com for the best Pitt coverage, Panther-Lair.com. I'll tell you about that in a little bit. But the reality is, all I can think about is how we're in this very interesting time right now in college sports. And this podcast right now is very much of the moment. All right, and what we're going to talk about tonight is very much of the moment, and it's Pitt related, and it very much touches Pitt, and it's college football and college sports related. And so there's a lot of tentacles from this thing. But when you go back to the summer, you go back to July 1st or June 1st, I forget which one, I think it was July 1st, when name, image, likeness legislation passed, and student athletes, college sports student athletes could start making money off their, as it says, names, images, and likenesses, as well they should be able to do. There was a lot of talk, and there was a lot of grand declarations, and there was a lot of bloviating about what this is all going to mean, and this is this, and this is that, and it's going to change this, and it's going to change that. And what I said, and I'm sure I probably said it right here on this podcast. I know I said it to anybody who would ask. I know I said it on the message boards. I know I said it on Twitter. My message all along, my point was, let's just wait and see. All right? And you saw, really just over the course of the summer, in the span of about 2 months, you saw everything. You saw a freshman at Ohio State get $1 million deal. You saw guys get cars. You saw guys do things for charity. You guys saw guys do things like the Kenny Pickett show. It was everywhere, and there were tons of things happening, and it was all over the place, and you saw this huge variety of ways student athletes were using these NIL deals. And that's why I said, let's just wait. Okay? Let's just wait and see what this looks like 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now. Maybe they won't all be getting these $1 million deals anymore. Maybe it'll settle into some place. The market will correct itself. The market will define what market value actually is on some of these things. And it won't be sort of as scattershot as it appeared to be in those early months. This is what I said, because I felt like we were in a time of transition. And when you're in a time of transition, you don't want to overstate what it is that's happening. You don't want to make too big a deal out of what it is that's happening. You want to take it all in the perspective of we're in transition, okay? And when you're in transition, you're going to try out a lot of different things. You're going to go down a lot of different alleys, and you're going to find that some of them lead to dead ends. And you're going to find that some lead to a path that you don't really want to go down. And you're going to find that some are exactly what you want it to be. And you might even be surprised at what it turns out to be. And I think there were instances of that with Cal Adamitis and Trey Tipton and John Patrician. Kenny Pickett did some charitable things. And so there were a lot of different ways it could go. And I said, look, we're going to see a lot here. And it's going to look crazy at times. But let's just chill. Let's just watch, observe, take notes, and see what makes the most sense. And see how this market sort of not just stabilizes, but how it establishes itself. Because this was a brand new thing. This was a whole new world that we were marching into with his name, image, likeness stuff. And I didn't know what to expect. And a lot of people said, well, it's going to be this or it's going to be that. And I said, you don't know. You don't know what it's going to be because we've never had anything like this before. And there's a million different ways it can go. And it'll probably go all of those and more before it settles into what it's really going to be. And 6 months in, it's become what a lot of people were afraid it would become. It's become free agency. And it's been used, and it's being used to establish full-blown college football free agency, where the very best players can come out of a very good season and they can put their names in the transfer portal as a way of initiating the process. And the process is they take meetings, their representatives take meetings, and you find out where the best offer is. And you look for the campus you like the most and the development you like the most and the coaches and all this stuff, and you find out who's going to pay. And you find out where you're going to get the most money. And then you decide if maybe even the school you were at has the best offer. So you go out of the transfer, you withdraw from the transfer portal, and you stay where your heart always was. Home, you stay home. It's what mattered the most to you. It's where you always wanted to be anyway. It's why you went there as a recruit out of high school. Or maybe you find this other opportunity where that NIL deal is just a lot better, and you go there. And it might be at a higher level or it might be at a lower level. You might be changing conferences. You might be in the conference. Who knows? You can play right away. And so you find out what the best deal is. That's free agency. That's free agency. And those are the ones who are doing it above board, going into the portal and searching out and taking those meetings. We used to have official visits. Now it's business meetings. And the player doesn't even have to go. His rep just goes and meets. And it's all above board. It's all legal if you're in the transfer portal. If you're not in the transfer portal, it's tampering. But if you're in the transfer portal, it's all legal. And we're just talking about the guys who do it above board. Because you're kidding yourself if you think these things aren't happening before a kid even goes into the transfer portal. Who was it? Dabo or Brian Kelly or probably Pat Narduzzi. Coaches all across the country. And I always sort of have this knee-jerk reaction when coaches start talking about ethics in college sports and this and that. And I'm like, get out of here. I don't want to hear it. Just save it. Save the preaching. I want to talk to a football coach. I don't want to talk to a preacher. Okay? I don't want to hear that stuff. I'm not interested in it. But damn if they're not right. You know what I mean? Like, this is happening. And the player doesn't even have to be involved in it. The player doesn't even have to be involved in like tampering. The player, go look at social media and go look at the number of top college football players who have their rep. It's not an agent. Whatever it is, it's someone who handles these deals for them, and they have the contact info right there in their social media. Now, that's for getting NIL deals. You know what I mean? Like, that tells somebody like me who to contact if I want to set up another show like the Kenny Pickett Show. That tells somebody like the Power of Bowser who to contact if they want to give somebody a car. It tells, Dave and Andy's who to contact if they want to set somebody up on a ice cream promotion. That's what it's there for. But guess who else is using that? It might not be, the head coach at a school. It might not be the recruiting director at a school, but it's somebody connected to the school. It's somebody who has a rooting interest in the school, and it's somebody who's going to be behind the NIL deal that the player ultimately gets. And the player doesn't even have to be involved in that conversation. The player doesn't even have to have any part in it. They're not getting tampered with. Nobody talked to them. It's through their reps. So you got the guys who are actually doing it above board. They're going into the transfer portal and then having those meetings, or their reps are having those meetings. And then you got the guys who aren't, who don't go into the transfer portal. Everything's hunky-dory. I'm happy where I am, getting ready for the next season, season 2 loading or whatever it is, season 4 loading, or, run it back and all this stuff. Meanwhile, the reps are out there fielding calls from whoever at wherever. And these things are getting put together. And like I said, I'm one who really tries to hold back. When I'm in the moment, try to keep perspective on what I'm seeing. Try to keep perspective. Try to pull back and look at the big picture as much as possible. And look at not just what's happening today, but what happened yesterday and what might happen tomorrow. And what happened 3 months ago and what might happen 3 months from now. And what happened last year and what might happen next year. Oh, the early recruiting period, this or that. The early signing period, this or that. The official visit period, this or that. Okay, well, let's see it after a couple years. You know what? After a couple years, it looks like the early signing period wasn't a very good idea. It's had some negative impacts. But I wanted to take a couple years before I decided that. I like to have a little bit of perspective. I like to try to let things develop and see where they actually go. And 6 months in, that's what this is. That's what this has become. You combine the NIL deals and NIL legislation with the transfer portal. You have college football free agency. And it's not for everybody. Excuse me. It's not everybody in the country who can take advantage of this. But the top players can. The top players can. And so, you have a case like Caleb Williams, the quarterback at Oklahoma. He goes into the transfer portal. Kind of understandably, or at least he announced he did. I forget if he actually officially went in yet. I know he tweeted that he was going to. And he did it to explore his options. And you understand it to some extent. It was a coaching change, right? Lincoln Riley's gone. They bring in Brent Venables. Who knows if that's going to fit? Who knows if that's going to be a good offense? But now he's going to explore his options. Wants to find the best place to develop him. Best place is going to help him get to the next level. And I don't know Caleb Williams. I don't know his intentions. I don't know what he does. I don't know anything about him. I don't know anything about his family. But in January of 2022, if you are a top college football player and you tell me you are going into the transfer portal to explore your options, I'm going to make some assumptions about what I think that means. And I'm going to make some assumptions about what that means for you and what that means for the school that you potentially end up with. Even if it's going back to Oklahoma, I'm going to make some assumptions about that. That's what this has become. It's become, in some respects, sort of the worst of what people predicted. And I shouldn't say the worst. I shouldn't say the worst. And the fact is, I'm talking about all these things like, oh, it's college football free agency. Sky is falling. Well, yes and no. I mean, we're allowing these student athletes to profit from their success. Right? I mean, to maximize their success, to take their success and turn it into a favorable situation, whether it's financially, whether it's the school they go to. Pitt just got Konata Mumpfield, right? And I'm not gonna sit here and say that, oh, Pitt worked some backdoor deals and carved out the best NIL. I mean, literally, they were up against Ole Miss. I'm pretty sure Ole Miss can outspend Pitt. They were up against LSU. I'm pretty sure LSU could get together donors and boosters to outspend Pitt. Not that I think Pitt is going to go cheap in this thing. I think they're going to make a valiant effort to start being competitive in this way. But, I mean, they just went out and got Konata Mumfield, a guy who left because of a coaching change and ends up going up a level and had a lot of Power 5 options after playing at Akron. And so, I mean, this is part of the game, and I don't begrudge guys who want to change levels. You know what I mean? Guys who succeed or excel at a lower level, either G5 school or FCS or D2 or whatever it is, and they say, I can play at a higher level. You know, I'm D2 now, but I know I can play FCS. I'm FCS now, but I know I can play G5. I'm G5 now, but I know I can play Power 5. I don't begrudge anyone that decision. And it has worked out for Pitt in the past. I mean, Stefano Millen is a great example. Guy who had success at Kent State, and now this was as a grad transfer. This was pre-transfer portal, but he says, I think I can do better. I think I can excel. I think I can play at that higher level. Konata Mumfield believes that as well. He says, I've had all this success at Akron. My coaches left. We have a coaching change. I think I can play at the Power 5 level, and I'm going to go. And so I don't begrudge the players having the right to do this or having the ability to do this, but I don't think we should pretend that it's something that it's not. It is moving full speed toward a full-blown free agency. And maybe this was predictable, maybe it wasn't, I don't know. But the question is, I mean, it's kind of a two-part question. One, what do we do about it? Two, should we do anything about it? You know what I mean? Is this just sort of natural, letting labor sort of control its fortunes and set the market for itself? Labor isn't technically setting the market here. I mean, it's outside forces that are setting the market, but labor taking advantage of how the market is set. You know, is it really something that is it something that is it something that needs to be fixed? And the only thing I would say, if this is the direction it's going to keep going, and I don't see why it would slow down. I had the foolish theory a year ago or a year and a half ago over the summer when college administrators were talking about how, there's just no money. There's no money. We've lost so much revenue. We have to cut sports. We have to do all these things. It's just a terrible situation. Oh goodness, we've lost so much money. And then they're paying Mel Tucker $9 million and Brian Kelly's getting $100. Don't cry to me about not having money when you're going to give these kind of coaching deals. You're going to fire guys in the middle of the season and pay them to go away and hire Oklahoma's coach to come in. Don't cry to me about not having any money. I don't remember what I was trying to say about there. If this is the direction that it's headed. And I don't see any reason why this wouldn't be the direction that it's going to continue to head, because college sports have shown, and college sports administrations, college sports officials, people affiliated and involved with college sports, the entity of college sports has shown that it knows no limits in how grand it will become and to what lengths they will go in order to win. And so if that's going to be the case, the only thing I could say that you could do, you're not going to fix anything. And again, I don't want to say that there's something we need to fix, but the only thing you could do is just formalize the process and just call it what it is and say, we now have college football free agency, make rules about how that free agency operates and enforce them with transparency. All right. I mean, that's the only thing you can do is try to get everything above board. After 40 years after SMU, just finally just give up and say, screw it, man. You can just do whatever you're going to do. Pay these guys. That's cool. Give them whatever cars you want to give them. Give them whatever cash you want to give them. Just make some accounting of it. Salary cap? I don't know. But I mean, it's all personal earnings, right? It's not the schools paying them. It's these NIL deals. So it allows the schools to step out of it and say, we're not paying these guys. They're not employees. We're not giving them a salary. It's nothing like that. But our Heisman Trophy candidate is going to get $1 million deal. Our freshman quarterback coming in is going to get $1 million deal. This guy, we're trying to get to transfer. We're going to offer him $500,000 or $750,000 or a quarter, whatever it is. So you might as well, have some transparency about it, and try to sort of formalize the process. Regulate the process as much as you can. Of course, you need a governing body with any kind of teeth or any kind of, actual impact or ability to enforce anything. But that's another story altogether. I didn't necessarily intend to spend the first 20 minutes complaining about this. And I don't actually mean to complain. It just kind of like hit me in the face today like a load of bricks of, wow, this is actually what it is. And it was different things that I've sort of been following, stories that I follow online, things I've been hearing from different people about different stories, like just kind of all over the place. There's a lot of different things. Just kind of, it all came together. And I think at some point this afternoon, it just, like I say, it hit me in the face of like, oh my God, this is it. This is what's happening. It actually is happening. And so, what are you going to do? I mean, if you're Pitt, all you can do is try and find ways to be competitive. And that works two ways. One is trying to be competitive and getting guys to come to your program, to go out and get transfers and make it lucrative for them to come to your program. And then the other is try and find ways to make it lucrative for your best players to stay in your program and not get poached. Because I don't want to say that's happening, but I'm pretty sure some people are trying to make that happen. To try and get some of Pitt's best players away. And that's not unique to Pitt. I think you look at any school across the country, standout guys are getting approached one way or the other, above board or below. And for the most part, it's below board. Because you don't see, major award winners and top guys in the transfer portal, so it's not happening above board in that respect. But it's happening all over the country. And this is the reality of college sports, at least for right now. Maybe it changes a year from now. I don't see how you're gonna put that back. Put the cat back in the bag, close Pandora's box, put Prince Albert back in a can. I mean, I don't that they opened the can, the fake snakes popped out, they're out now, and you can't do anything about it. I really don't think you can change. You keep moving further down the road. You never back up. I had this hope like a year and a half ago, that college sports was going to have some reckoning with the loss of revenues from the COVID year, and they were going to dial things back. They were going to get facility spending under control. They were going to get coaches' salary spending under control. They were just going to become a little less exorbitant, a little less ridiculous, a little less out of control. And brother, I was wrong. I was so wrong about that. All right, you guys have all been on the super chatters. I appreciate it. Everybody's been in the chats, and I appreciate you kind of bearing with me as I said all that stuff and got it all, I don't want to say off my chest, because I think a lot of people are thinking that stuff too. But I mean, it's the reality of what it is now. So John Bridgen started us off as a super chatter, and we appreciate that. If you want to be a super chatter, make sure your comments and questions get read and answered. You can hit that little $sign down at the bottom. We definitely get to all our super chatters. Really appreciate it. Because, I mean, ultimately we do these podcasts for fun. It is fun, even if I seem angsty tonight and drinking. That's just kind of what happens. But, we do enjoy doing the podcast. It's fun, but certainly appreciate the support from the super chatters. John Bridgen says, thanks for helping contribute so much to add even more to what was already a great season. I hope your business is booming. Yeah, John, it's been a great season. I always say, people always ask me, like, I feel like this happens at bars. I'll be at a bar, I'll be drinking, talking to some Pitt fans, and at a certain point, it always kind of comes that, we'll be having a few, and somebody will be like, come on, man. I mean, you root for Pitt, right? You root for Pitt. I know it's your job. You got to be objective, but you root for them, right? You went to Pitt. You root for Pitt, right? What I always say, kind of my patent on answer is, look, you're right. This is my job. And it's a business, and I'm trying to run a business and, support my family and pay the guys who write for us, Jim and Houston and Steve and Matt and Matt Hawley who takes photos for us, and Josh Hammock who does, film breakdowns, all this stuff. I want to pay those guys. I want to take care of those guys. I want to I want to operate the business. And so whatever's good for business is what I like. It's what I root for. When I'm sitting there watching a game on Saturdays at Heinz Field, as events are unfolding, am I thinking to myself, oh, geez, how's the message board going to handle this? Yeah, I am. When it's the Western Michigan game, as I'm walking out of the Western Michigan game this year, I'm not thinking like, darn it, can't believe Pitt lost. I'm thinking, message boards are going to be a real bummer this week, because that's the job part of it. Like the direct impact on my life of Pitt sports is what it does for the bottom line of subscriptions and what it does for the message boards. And if it makes the message boards a giant bummer for a week, well, that bums me out. You know what I mean? Because I got to deal with that. I got to surf through it and dig through it and interact with people all day, every day. And, it gets tiring when you read about how the coaching staff should be fired for the 38th time that day. And likewise, when they win, you know what I mean? When they beat Virginia Tech, when they beat Clemson, when they clinch the Coastal against Virginia, as I'm walking out of Heinz Field, I'm thinking, it's going to be a good week on the boards. You know what I mean? They win the ACC championship, and I almost fist pump because I'm like, boy, fans are going to be happy. I want it for you. I want it for you guys to have a good time on the message boards. And so, that is, as far as a season for me, that's how I look at it, and that's how I kind of approach it. And now, there's something to be said for the fact that when things go wrong, when there's a coach getting fired or a coach leaves and you get into coaching searches, those can be good for business too. And we build a lot of what we have on the site in the coaching searches of 2010 and 2011 and 2015 or 2014, I guess. But the reality is, good news sells too. And people like reading about Pitt and talking about Pitt when things are going well. And that makes it fun. So it was a good season. This year was, it was fun. It was fun to follow this team. It was fun to see them have the success. I like a lot of the guys on the team. I like a lot of the coaches, and of course the fans on the message boards. They made it fun to follow this thing as well. Let's see here. Garrett Sherwin says, is Ethiel Horton going to play/start tomorrow night? I think he's going to play. I don't know if he'll be in the starting lineup or not. It's going to be really interesting to see. It's going to be really interesting to see what his role is and how he figures into the rotation in the lineup, how fresh he is. I'm guessing there's some rust. He got a little bit of extra time after the game on Saturday was postponed, the Virginia Tech game, but now he's going to go to Louisville, and we'll see what's we'll see what he does. I'm interested to see. It's not going to be all of a sudden they're one of the best teams in the ACC. I don't even know how much better he makes them just with his presence. You know what I mean? I don't know if they all of a sudden become a lot better than they were before. I think it... I think it helps because it gives you another guard to use in the rotation. I think it helps because your bench got a little bit deeper when you add him back into the mix, whether he's coming off the bench or whether he's working in the starting rotation. So I think, because that game against Notre Dame, I think they played 7 guys, and 5 of them played like 30, 34 minutes or something like that. So they really didn't have much depth to rotate with. And you just can't play like that. You can't play like that night after night after night where 5 guys are playing 30-plus minutes or 35 minutes or something like that. You need to be able to rotate or else you're just going to burn guys out. And so you add Ethiel Horton back into the mix. He's only one guy. He's one guy who you don't really know what you're going to get from him, but you can count on him. He should be good enough that he can play 25 minutes. You know what I mean? And that's going to take some of the pressure off. Just in terms of minutes logged, some of the pressure off Jamarius Burton and Femi Odekale, and you can move guys around a little bit more, and I think you keep Onibuchi Izikudo in the lineup and in the rotation. I think you keep working him in. He's earned playing time, I think, but you're really, you're just going to be able to give everybody a little bit more rest, whereas before you really couldn't. Josh Newark says, what's crazy is the bowl ratings just came out and they continue to kill, yet I am so bored by these playoffs always being the same teams. I won't watch Monday as it is on too late, and I am bored with the SEC Championship game part 2. It's definitely on too late. I think it's annoying that it's on a Monday night. I wish it was on like a Saturday. I think they could go Saturday and still have a full week of preparation time. I mean, what time does it start on Monday night? Like 8:30 or something? My kids are 9 and 7. They're not going to watch any of that. Now, they were excited to watch some of the Cincinnati-Alabama game, and they were excited to watch some of the Michigan-Georgia game. Like, they were excited watching some of that. They thought that was fun. That was cool. It was a playoff game. But they're not going to watch any of the championship game. Maybe a little bit of the first quarter. It's on too late. It's the same thing with the basketball national championship game. It's the same thing they do with the World Series games. It's on too late. You want kids to watch. Well, they're not going to be able to. But you got to make the almighty dollar, and that's been a pretty good formula for sports in general. You make a lot of cash. Let's see here. Tim Spader, super chatter, we really appreciate it. Tim says, what are your thoughts of Maryland offensive coordinator Dan Enos? There are several boxes that he seems to check. His history with Pat Narduzzi at Michigan State. His offense broke all-time passing records, and he's a Power 5 offensive coordinator. Yeah, there's... I think when Pat Narduzzi's looking... Well, I mean, to your immediate question, Tim, about Dan Enos, I don't think that's happening. His name gets brought up all the time because of his history with Pat Narduzzi, that they worked together at Michigan State, but it's not happening. I think there was a point 5 years ago, 6 years ago, where it was a possibility. I don't think that's happening. I think that ship has sailed. I don't see those guys working together again. As far as Pat Narduzzi and the offensive coordinator, I know there's been a bunch of questions here. I don't really know. I don't really know. I don't know what Pat Narduzzi's short list looks like right now. I know Alex Van Pelt isn't on it. I know Chris Beatty isn't on it. I know those guys aren't happening. Dan Enos is not happening. I can rule a few guys out, but I don't really know who the guys are who are in, if that makes any sense. I don't know who he's focused on. I think he's not in a rush to make this hire, and I think that's okay. They got a quarterback transfer without an offensive coordinator hired, so it's not holding them back in that regard. But I'm not really sure who he's trying to pursue. I think what you would look for is a guy with experience working with quarterbacks and most likely Power 5 offensive coordinator experience. I think Pat Narduzzi wants somebody, and part of that is just when you look at his history of guys that he's brought in, whether it was Jim Chaney, it was Mark Whipple, even Matt Canada. He had Sean Watson working with the quarterbacks. Watson had a history of working with quarterbacks. He brought in Whipple because he wanted Whipple to do an even better job developing Kenny Pickett, which I think he ultimately did. But I think that's what Pat Narduzzi wants. I think he wants his offensive coordinator to be the quarterback's coach. I think he wants his offensive coordinator to have a history working with quarterbacks. And I think he wants his offensive coordinator to have some Power 5 experience, calling plays at the Power 5 level. I think those are sort of the key elements that Pat Narduzzi is going to look for with the offensive coordinator. And so, guys who don't fit that model, you know what I mean? Guys who don't fit those sort of parameters, I would be surprised. You know what I mean? I think they're probably non-starters at this point. I think he's going to find somebody who fits that mold. And there's a lot of guys out there who would fit that mold. So it gets a little bit trickier to kind of narrow it down from there. But that's sort of what we're looking at or what we're expecting. I had some other super chatters here I want to get to. Let me see. There was a few other. We got Tim. There, RJCman38 says, I'm concerned why 2 linebackers chose to leave. Is culture a problem? Well, actually, I mean, RJCman, it's been 4 linebackers. If you go through the whole season, Wendell Davis, A.J. Roberts, Leslie Smith, and Cam Bright, they all left. Cam Bright was the most recent one. And that was on Monday that he decided to transfer. And that's really a topic we should discuss. I mean, really, Pitt, since our last show on New Year's Eve, Pitt has lost like 4 transfers and they've added 2. So we really should be talking about those things instead of me spending a half hour complaining about or talking about college football free agency. But it is relevant because, look, like I said, Pitt lost 4 transfers since the end of the Peach Bowl, and they've added 2. Overall, Pitt has had 9 transfers, 9 guys who were on the roster at the beginning of the 2021 season. 9 guys have left, and they brought in 3 transfers. Now, they need the attrition in order to fit the recruits and the transfers and the super seniors, and that's just kind of part of it. But specifically regarding the linebackers. So you have Wendell Davis, you have A.J. Roberts, Leslie Smith, and most recently Cam Bright. And let's start with Cam Bright. He announced his transfer decision on Monday, that he was going to enter the transfer portal. And I think that was a surprise. It was a surprise to me. Some people at Pitt that I've talked to, I don't know if they were as surprised. I think they rarely are surprised when guys end up going into the transfer portal. Every now and then, one will catch them off guard, but for the most part, I think people around Pitt, they had expectations that Cam Bright would go into the transfer portal. I think a lot of, I would say almost everybody at Pitt thought that Cam Bright would not be back at Pitt next season. I would say that most of them believed he was going to go to the NFL. And that was my expectation. I never really, I kept Cam Bright on the scholarship board because he hadn't announced what he was going to do. But he had the option to come back in 2022 as a super senior. He was in the class of 2017. So he would have been a sixth-year player in 2022. But I didn't think he was going to do it. I expected him to go to the NFL and try and impress people at the combine, try and impress people, at pro day, and hope to get drafted and maybe catch on. I don't know where he would play or how he would fit, but I think he's a good player, and we could talk about his performance at Pitt. But more importantly, I was surprised because, like I say, I expected him to go to the NFL, not go into the transfer portal. That was a bit of a surprise. That was a big surprise to me, actually. I didn't think he'd be back at Pitt, though. And so, I was already kind of in my head counting him out for the 2022 roster and the 2022 linebacker depth chart. But I thought it was because he would go to the NFL. When you look at all four of these guys, though, Wendell Davis, A.J. Roberts, Leslie Smith, Cam Bright. Davis is going to Northwestern. Roberts is going to Stony Brook. Smith and Bright haven't announced any transfer destinations yet. And I think when you see four linebackers transfer out, there are questions about Ryan Manilak. And, first-year linebackers coach at Pitt. Is there a culture problem, like RJ Seaman 38 said? Are there issues, with Manilak that, the linebackers don't like him? They're transferring to get away from him. There's four guys leaving. There must be some kind of issue. And I guess I would say, when I look at it, okay, first of all, I would say, yeah, if there are four guys leaving one position, you do ask questions about the position coach. What's the issue in the room? What's the problem there? Why are guys running away from this team, a team that had a lot of success this past season, is positioned to have a lot of success in the coming season? Why are the guys running away from this team, and so many of them at one position? Again, there's 9 transfers for Pitt this season. 4 of them have been linebackers. And so I understand where the questions would come from. I think they're reasonable questions. They're questions I would ask myself, or questions I have asked myself, and questions I've asked of other people. And I think kind of what the conclusion I've come to when I sort of look at the situation is that you have to evaluate each one individually. Now, if you find out that all 4 guys hated Ryan Manilak, well, that's a problem. But I don't think that's the case. A.J. Roberts and Leslie Smith, they weren't playing. And I think from those guys' perspectives, A.J. Roberts is looking at, a couple of middle linebackers ahead of him. There was even talk at one point he kind of played some defensive ends, so maybe they're moving him around at positions. Probably just wasn't the situation that he wanted to be in anymore. Felt like he could have a better chance somewhere else. So he goes to Stony Brook. Leslie Smith wasn't playing. He was behind a lot of guys. He was behind, guys younger than him. And so he says, well, I can do better somewhere else. I can get a better shot to get on the field because it doesn't look like I'm all that close here. Wendell Davis is a little bit more curious because he was close. He was the backup middle linebacker behind Servassier Dennis. He played a lot before he transferred after the Miami game. But the Miami game seems to have loomed kind of large there. The Miami game, he missed a tackle on it was a long touchdown run or just a long run that set up a touchdown. And I think he took some heat for that. And, it doesn't seem like that set really well. I don't know exactly what happened on the sidelines. I don't know exactly what happened in the locker room. I don't know if it was entirely Ryan Manilak. I don't know if it was Ryan Manilak at all. I think Pat Narduzzi might have been involved. But either way, Wendell Davis didn't feel like it was a good situation for him anymore. So he left. Cam Bright, there's no questions about playing time with Cam Bright. Started a ton of games over the course of his career. He was one of the main linebackers. He was a team captain this year. But there was video that came out from the sidelines at the Peach Bowl. Cam Bright in a fight with his teammate. And, I think initially when that video came out, and I think enough people have said it, I'm not really drawing attention to something that was kind of undercover or wasn't seen. I think a lot of people have seen the video, and if you haven't, I think you can find it pretty easily online. But I think, when that video first came out, I was willing to chalk it up to, man, just competitive. Guys are just fired up. In the heat of competition, they're losing. They've just given up the go-ahead touchdown. They're really frustrated. They gave up 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, blow an 11-point lead, and they're just, frustration boiled over. It's going to happen. Families, have squabbles every now and then. And that was what I initially kind of wrote it off as, the day after, on New Year's Eve. That was kind of how I wrote it off. I'm not sure if it was just that, though. Maybe it was a little bit more than that. Maybe it ran a little deeper than that. And maybe it was the kind of situation where all parties felt like it was probably a good idea to split and part ways. And so when I look at all 4 of those linebacker transfers, I'm not sure, I haven't gotten any indication from anyone I've talked to that any one of those 4 guys had a problem specifically with Ryan Manalack. I think it's just, you're going to have bigger numbers of transfers than we've seen in the past, just because that's the way of college football now. I won't start on another rant about that. You're going to have bigger numbers of transfers than we've seen in the past. And I think, sometimes you're going to have a few at one position. They had 2 running backs transfer this year too, A.J. Davis and Todd Sibley. I mean, I don't think anybody's asking about the culture in the running back room because A.J. Davis and Todd Sibley weren't playing. They were behind other guys. I think there are often explanations other than just, boy, there's big issues, there's big problems. Well, each guy has his own reason for going, and it's often not, kind of indicative of a bigger problem. We're always on the watch out. We're always on the lookout for the bigger problems, but usually it's not indicative of a bigger problem. Joe New says, on a lighter note, Chris, would you agree Pat Narduzzi looks a lot like Joe Gatto from Impractical Jokers? I'm going to be honest, I don't know who that is. I really don't know. I don't think I've ever watched Impractical Jokers. I think I've watched maybe 1 or 2 episodes here or there. I think I've watched, is that like Dude Perfect? I've watched a little bit of that. Not too much, though. So I can't tell you if he looks like that guy or not. All right, let's get back into the comments and questions here. Scott Eisenberg says, since the 2022 class is pretty much done, have there been any interesting 2023 recruiting developments over the past few weeks? Probably the most interesting one, and it was a few weeks ago, I forget exactly when, Rodney Gallagher announced that he's going to focus on football in college. So that's a notable one. Laurel Highlands standout 4-star prospect in the 2023 recruiting class. Could have played football or basketball, had offers from Pitt for both. And decided he's gonna focus on football for college, because he had been going back and forth about what sport he wanted to play in college. And it seems like, not seems like, he said very specifically he's going to play football. So that's pretty notable. I still think Pitt's in great shape for Rodney Gallagher. I think they've got a great chance to land him, but it's going to be a battle because he's a top prospect. He's a top 250 prospect, should be a top 100 prospect. He's really, really good. Josh Newark says, could you do a dummy explanation of the name, image, likeness legislation? Is there a set dollar value a school can offer a kid? Or could Chris Bickle, money of, paid $10 million, flat out buy a bunch of high profile players? Well, so the way it works, it's basically you can use your name, your image, or your likeness to make money, to raise money, to do advertisements. There are a lot of ways you can go about it. Now, it's the best way to put it. On its surface, it's things like, Kenny Pickett gets free meals from that restaurant. You know what I mean? He gets a free meal for him and his offensive lineman. And they go there once a week, and he tweets about it, and it's a promotional deal. You know what I mean? I think Kenny Pickett got a truck. It's a promotional deal. It's just like Ben Roethlisberger would get, or Sidney Crosby would get, or any of those kinds of things. It's I think that was the initial intention. There was also, there were guys and girls, student athletes, who would have like YouTube channels, but they couldn't monetize their YouTube channels. They couldn't do a chat like this, like super chatters or things like that, because they couldn't monetize. It was violating the amateurism rules. And so, initially, and kind of on its surface, I mean, that was the goal, was to allow kids to make money off their names and images and likenesses, sell jerseys with their name on it, sell T-shirts with their name or their logo on it. Damar Hamlin had a company, an LLC, when he was like in high school and in college, chasing millions, and they made logos and merchandise, shirts and hats and whatever else. It said chasing M's, but Damar Hamlin couldn't operate it. He couldn't be affiliated with it. There were all kinds of rules and rules and hoops they had to jump through to make sure it was not him. He couldn't be on it. It had to be someone else, and just to sell this merchandise. Well, why shouldn't he be able to sell this merchandise? And so that was kind of ostensibly what the whole thing was aimed at. Guys found ways to use it to raise money for charity, obviously, like Cal Adamitis and Johnny Patrician and Trey Tipton. Kenny Pickett did some charitable things, gave out KP8 shirts to boys and girls clubs and things like that. And so there are a lot of ways it can go, but ultimately, what they're finding is boosters can offer NIL deals to players, and there can even be talk in the recruiting process, and some of that is legal and some of it's not, and there's probably a fine line that gets danced there, but or gets walked. But that's kind of the long and short of it. Is it's a way to get money to the players, and there have to be, for these deals, there have to be contracts. Pitt has to approve the contracts, not necessarily that they say, no, we don't want you to do that, but this is within the letter of the rules. But that's kind of how it works. And, Josh follows up and says, are these NIL deals straight cash into the players' pockets? They're mostly cash into the players' pockets, with a percentage going to their representative, because all these guys are working with someone who, it's an agent. It's not an agent, but it's an agent. It's someone who's going to represent them in negotiations with potential sponsors and kind of be a liaison with the university to get the paperwork put together, probably with a legal background. They're agents, you know what I mean? And I think a lot of the guys who are doing some of this representative work are actual NFL agents who probably on their end are looking to get a head start with some of the top guys, but they're not officially acting as agents in a way that would violate their NCAA eligibility. Yeah, that's the situation. Let's see here. Josh Newark follows up and asks, there's no cap to this? No, there's not. It's not a salary cap. It's not a salary. Each guy can make what he is worth or what people are willing to give him. And that's it. Let's see here. Talk is Pitt says, since we are thin at linebacker, should we grab one from the portal, wait to see who develops, or ask an undersized defensive end to play linebacker? So that's a good question, and it's something I think is worth discussing. That's kind of part of the angle with the Cam Bright thing. So going back to what I was saying about Cam Bright transferring, I think they knew. I don't think Pitt was counting on him being back in 2022. I think they expected him to go. They probably expected him to go to the NFL. A little surprised that he went the transfer route, but they didn't expect him to come back. They knew they were going to be a little bit thin this year at linebacker. I think that was always kind of expected when you look at the roster. The fact that they were going to lose Patrician, Campbell, and Pine for sure. And then Bright, most likely, they knew they were going to be down 4 linebackers from the 2021 roster. And then you throw in Wendell Davis and A.J. Roberts and Leslie Smith. That's 3 more guys. So you're losing 7 linebackers who were on the roster at the start of the 2021 season. You expected at least 4 of those and probably thought there was a good chance that a Smith or a Roberts or maybe both would leave. So I think the Pitt coaches thought they would be a little short at linebacker. The reality is they would have been in this position last year if not for the super senior rule that allowed Phil Campbell and John Patrician and Chase Pine to come back. Now those guys are gone. And they've got Servassier Dennis back, and that's big. They've got Brandon George back, who's a backup middle linebacker. I think that's a good role for him. And then that's kind of it. Bengali Kamara played more as the season went on, played a lot in the Peach Bowl. I think he's got a really high ceiling and can be really good. But that's kind of it in terms of experienced linebackers on the returning roster. And so they knew they were going to be in that tight position. They knew Servassier Dennis would be the leader of the group. And then they were willing, I think, to add a transfer or two and for the rest, just rely on the young guys. So they went out and got Michael Dowell, transfer from Michigan State, played a decent amount out there, played a lot of games, started a handful. Played, and Michigan State they list him as a safety on the roster. On the depth chart, they list him as a nickel back. He's basically playing like a field side linebacker. He's playing the star linebacker position. I don't know if Michigan State runs exactly the kind of defense that Pitt runs, but effectively he's playing the star linebacker position, which is that field side linebacker who has coverage responsibilities over the slot and has to play a lot of sideline to sideline. He's got a lot of ground to cover out there. And so they bring in Michael Dowell to kind of fill in that spot. And now you're looking at potentially your starting lineup of Dennis and Dowell, and then either maybe Brandon George moving out to the money linebacker, maybe Bengali Kamara moving over to the money linebacker. Those are probably your best options there. But you would think you would think that Dennis, Dowell, George, and Kamara are your top 4 linebackers. And then you're going to need a couple guys to fill out the top 6, whether it's Solomon Shields, whether it's Preston Levant, whether it's one of the freshmen coming in Marquand Pope and Kyle Lewis. And I apologize if I'm forgetting someone. Oh, Aiden Henningham is there as well. There's a lot of unproven guys. It's a lot of inexperienced guys. But I think the coaches knew they were going to be counting on inexperienced players, and they were willing to do it. They're willing to let those guys go out and play and grow up a little bit. And I think in college football, and college basketball too, but more so football, you're going to have these situations every few years. You know what I mean? And probably every season you're going to have at least one position that's a little bit thin because you graduated a bunch of guys. It's kind of the trade-off when you have a season where you're loaded at one position with tons of experienced guys and a bunch of guys who came back and highly productive guys, all these returning starters. You always see those stats about, like, I feel like Notre Dame always has it, or often has it, of like Notre Dame's offensive line has a combined total of 642 starts or something like that. 640 career starts. It's never that much, but you know what I mean. Well, you build up to that point. And then your next year, and they're all seniors, and then your next year you have a fall off. And I mean, quite frankly, Pitt's offensive line was headed for that in 2022 until Gabe Hoy and Carter Warren and Marcus Miner and Owen Drexel announced they're coming back. Now they're headed for it in 2023 because they're going to have, Warren, Miner, Hoy, and Drexel are all going to be 6th-year players, so they're not going to have any eligibility for 2023. Jake Cradle will be a 5th-year senior. He potentially could go. Blake Zabovic will be a 5th-year senior. He potentially could go. And that's not taking into account any transfers. So that drop-off is coming for Pitt's offensive line probably in 2023. It was coming in 2022, but those seniors came back as super seniors, so it kind of kicked the can down the road a little bit. But you'll have this. It's cyclical in college sports where you start here with guys that have no experience, and then you work your way up, and after like 2 years, they're really experienced and they're really good and they're ready to go and it's awesome, and then they're gone, and then you kind of start over, and it's up and down. And Pitt's linebackers are going to be in one of the downsides of that cycle. The good thing is they still have Servassier Dennis. I think Brandon George is a really solid middle linebacker. I think Michael Dowell is a good experienced piece to bring in, and then you're going to need some of those younger guys to step up. But I think there's a lot of talent in those younger ranks of the linebackers. There may be some lumps. You may take some lumps, but I think it gives you I think it gives you a chance for those guys to grow up on the field, a chance for those guys to get better from the start of the season to the end of the season. And I think Pitt, sports fans. I was about to say Pitt fans. I was about to say college sports fans. Sports fans in general always say, just get the young guys out there. Let them play. Let them learn. Let them take their mistakes, and they'll be better for it. Well, it's kind of what's going to happen this year for Pitt at linebacker. The good thing is you have an experienced defense around those guys. You have a lot of experienced defensive linemen, a lot of experienced defensive backs. And so you're going to be able to, you're not going to cover for the linebackers, but it's not like you've got an entire defense losing all of its starters. All right, let's see here. Right Sock says, is it possible for Naquan Brown to move to linebacker and play a lot next year? I don't know. I mean, Rivals.com, we ranked Naquan Brown as a 4-star linebacker prospect. I don't think he was ever projected to play linebacker in college. I'm not sure where we got that at Rivals. Pitt never really projected him to play linebacker. When he was committed to LSU, I think he was committed to play as a defensive end there. I think he was always going to be headed for the defensive line. He was just undersized, but not to the degree where you would confuse him with he was undersized, but kind of in that defensive end kind of way, where I think he could add some size and still be a smaller DN, but have quickness and be able to get around the tackles and be really tough to block. So I don't see him moving back to linebacker, and even if he did, I don't know if he would really position himself to play a lot in 2022. Let's see here. Mark Cadden says, is Pitt going to go after another linebacker in the transfer portal? Also, who do you think leaves to cut down to 85? So, second part first, we right now have Pitt projected for 89 scholarship players. Obviously, they have to get down to 85. That includes Deslin Alexandra and Grant Kerrigan, who we're currently projecting to return as super seniors, but we don't really know. Those guys haven't announced their intentions yet. They could come back for a 6th year, or they could leave. If they leave, then Pitt's at 87, and they need 2 more to go to get down to 85. If Alexandra and Kerrigan come back, then Pitt's at 89, and they need 4 more to go just to get to 85. And so that plays into the first part of the question: is Pitt going to go after another linebacker in the transfer portal? And they could. I think they could use it. We just laid out the depth situation. Certainly, if you could add another experienced linebacker, that's a huge boost to that group. But if you do that, now you need another guy to go. And I don't necessarily think they're done adding transfers, but there is a limit to how much you're really going to be able to add. I think more guys will transfer. Out of the 89 that we're talking about, I think you can get a few more out of there without really gutting the team. Like, you can look at a few positions. So look, when you look at the scholarship board, they're projected to have 5 scholarship quarterbacks on the roster. That's a lot. They're projected to have 13 scholarship defensive ends on the roster in 2022. That's a lot. I don't know if they're going to have. I don't think they're going to have 5 scholarship quarterbacks. I don't think they're going to have 13 scholarship defensive ends. I think you'll see some attrition out of those spots just because that's a lot of guys, and not everybody's going to play. And so I don't like to sit back and say, well, this guy will transfer or that guy will transfer. I don't like to say this guy will get fired or that guy will get fired. I don't like to fire people. I don't like to cost people their jobs. I mean, not that I would cost them their jobs, but I don't like to predict that somebody's going to lose their job. I don't like to predict that somebody's going to leave the team. I don't like that kind of speculation. Or I don't like engaging in it, I guess. But you can look at spots where they do have a lot of players and say, well, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody decides to go from there. So, but anybody else they add, they need to move more people. More guys need to leave to make room for it. So it's something to keep an eye on. Let's see here. Dave Pooge says, what's up with the men's basketball team? That's a good question. What's up with the men's basketball team? So I'm intrigued. I'm as intrigued by this team as I have been by any other Jeff Capel team, maybe since the first year. I'm really intrigued because of the games where they've been really close. You know, Virginia, Minnesota, Notre Dame. I mean, were they all 1-point losses? Maybe one was a 2-point loss. I mean, they've been right there in every one of those games, and that's intriguing to me. You know, there's part of me that says, how long can they keep that up? How many more times can they have losses like that? How many, how often can they keep playing? I mean, emotionally, can they do this for like 18 more games? I don't know. I think that's a lot to ask. But the fact that they've been able to battle themselves into this position, they're not the most talented team. You know what I mean? They're not out there with the best players in the ACC. Not even close. But the fact that, and I'm not saying Minnesota, Virginia, and Notre Dame are world beaters, but the fact that they've been able to compete with those teams like they have, that they've been one play away from winning every single one of those games, I mean, that impresses me. And it makes me really intrigued because this team keeps playing together. They keep playing hard. They make mistakes. There's no question about it. They have lapses. They take plays off at times, and it burns them. But I like this team. You know what I mean? I like what this team looks like. I like how they play. When they're out there, when they're playing hard, I like how they commit to defense. I like how they get after it on the rebounds, and I like how they share the ball. They're not perfect. It's going to be tough for them night after night after night, and they can't keep being in those kinds of close games. But I don't know if they're talented enough to really create any separation and hold on to it against ACC opponents. And so they're going to have to grind night after night after night, and they're going to take a lot of losses night after night after night. But I'm intrigued to see when those wins come, because they will come. I believe that the ball will bounce for this team a few times between now and the end of the ACC schedule. I don't know when. I don't know against who. I don't know how it's going to happen, but I believe it will happen. So, what's up with the men's basketball team? I think it's an interesting group. I think it's a group where there's a lot to like about them. They've got a really good player in John Hughley, really interesting developing guy in Mo Gee, and then some guys in Femi Odekale and Jamarius Burton who are just trying really hard to make it happen, and Will Jeffers who's trying. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't always make the right thing happen, but he's trying. He's working really hard at it. So, that's what I think is up with the men's basketball team. Let's see. Oh, Josh Newark asked a good question. Sam Scarton setting points record, albeit with 14 games. Does he earn a scholarship, and/or do they keep Ben Sauls as a scholarship backup kicker? So this is interesting, too. When it comes to the kicker scholarship, because Ben Sauls is on scholarship. He was a recruited kicker. He was a recruited scholarship kicker. Sam Scarton is not. He was a walk-on. He is a walk-on. But Scarton was the main place kicker this year. Sauls, I think, handled kickoffs. I don't know if you can afford to have two kickers on scholarship and a punter, which they'll have a punter on scholarship when Sam Vanderhaar gets here in January. And if you didn't see our interview with Sam Vanderhaar, it's on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com. You should check out all the signing day interviews that we ran a couple weeks ago. They're still pinned on the message boards. They're right here on the YouTube page. You can watch them. I think they're great. I don't even know if I have a favorite, but if I did, it would probably be Sam Vanderhaar from Australia. It's just a fun conversation with him. And it was like 10:30 at night in Pittsburgh, and it was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon there. So we had some jokes about the time difference and just about what he expects when he gets to Pittsburgh and all kinds of stuff. Really fun conversation. So I highly recommend you check that out. But I don't think Pitt can afford to have 3 kickers, 3 specialists on scholarship in 2022. So I don't know what you do with Sam Scarton and Ben Sauls. Either Ben Sauls wins the job and stays on scholarship If Sam Scarton wins the job and he's your starting kicker, I think you have to put him on scholarship. I don't know how you could not put him on scholarship, you know? But then I don't think they're going to take the scholarship away from Ben Sauls. Never seen something like that happen. Maybe he transfers. I don't know. If Ben Sauls were to transfer, that would open up the scholarship for Sam Scarton. But maybe Ben Sauls likes it at Pitt and doesn't want to transfer. Maybe Ben Sauls wants to be Pitt's kicker and he wants to keep competing for it. I don't know what's going to happen with that situation. It'll figure itself out, but I don't know what's going to happen there. Let's see here. Scroll down. Joe New says, if Ethiel Horton was on the Pitt football team, he would be long gone. No tolerance for character issues. Capel is desperate. I don't agree with that. You know, Pat Narduzzi hasn't had many guys get in trouble with the law. You know, he hasn't had many legal issues. But I don't think he's kicked anybody off for the ones that he had. I mean, I think 3 come to mind. Or at least they were like sort of public. Tyler Boyd, Rory Blair. I think they both had DUIs, both in the same year, prior to the 2015 season, I think. And then Alex Buchser had his issue. What year was that? 18? I forget. And all 3 of those guys stayed on the team. Now, I mean, Rory Blair eventually left the team, got kicked off the team, but not immediately after, immediately as a result of his legal issues. And, with Ethiel Horton, I haven't found one person around Pitt or affiliated with Pitt or around Horton who says this wasn't out of character for him. I said that in a really awkward way or a confusing way. I haven't found one person who wasn't surprised when this happened. I think the general feeling is this is not who he is. This is out of character moment. And I think, good leaders, good coaches don't just sort of have a reflexive or just have a reflex that, oh, you got arrested, you're off the team. They know them. They know character. They know the person, not just the player, the person. A couple of you guys are pointing out that punching a cop is a whole other level. No one punched a cop. No, I think for Dave Wanstead, was it Austin Ransom and Adam Gunn got in trouble with that kind of thing? Now, I mean, Wanstead might not be a good example because of what happened a couple of years later, but my point is that I think Pat Narduzzi, I don't think he would act sort of on reflex. I think if he felt confident about a player's character, the way the Pitt coaches and everyone around Pitt seems to feel about Ethiel Horton, if they believed that this was not who he is, that this is not his, that this is not his character, I think they would, I think Narduzzi would stand by him. I don't think he would just sort of automatically drop him. And I think there is a belief in second chances. RJC Man 38 says second chances occur at other schools. I don't know if that necessarily is the case, or it has to be the case, or always is the case. I think, when you have that, a strong support system at a school, and when you really are close with your players, when you really are family, if you know that's not who the guy is, if you know that's not who Ethiel Horton is, if you know that's not what he's about and that's not who he's been in the time that you've known him, then, you don't just drop him right off the bat. You stick with him. You support him. And you try and help him get through it. And if it gets to a point where, you can't stand by him anymore, then you move. But, I don't think they're at that point yet. And I don't know if they'll get to that point. I'm not sure. You need to get to the point where you go to home field, though. This is the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors sweatshirt that I have on right now. It's the most comfortable sweatshirt I own. It fits super well. It's super soft. I've washed it a bunch of times, and it keeps its shape. The hood is giant. It's great. The strings are giant. It's great. Keeps its shape. The elasticity around the bottom. I hate it when hoodies lose that, and they just kind of hang off of you. That bugs me to no end. This home field hoodie doesn't happen. It doesn't hang off of you like that. It stayed. And I've had this for a couple of years now. How long have I been talking to you guys about home field? Because I got this, I think, the first time we started working with home field. And so, look at that. It's a sweet logo, super high quality sweatshirt. And if you go to homefieldapparel.com right now, check out their Pitt stuff, check out all the stuff they have. And you're a first-time shopper there, you use the promo code LAIR, L-A-I-R. You'll get 15% off your first order. 15% off some of the best college gear that you're going to find. And you can get Pitt because their Pitt designs are awesome. You can get almost any school that you want. There's a few they don't have. But I don't think you'll want to buy from those. You'll like the other schools that they do rep. You'll like the logos. And once you get the shirts and the sweatshirts, you'll love the material and you'll love how good the quality is. Homefieldapparel.com. I know I talk about it every week. Why would I stop talking about it? They make great, great stuff. Homefieldapparel.com. Use the promo code LAIR, L-A-I-R, to get 15% off your first order. And make sure you go to Panther-Lair.com. I mean, talk about first things last here. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com is the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Football, basketball, recruiting, you find it all at Panther-Lair.com. And of course, message boards, where you can interact with hundreds and thousands of your closest Pitt fan friends. Panther-Lair.com. Go there, talk to other Pitt fans, read all the content, read all the analysis, read all the information, and then talk to other Pitt fans about it. It's a win-win-win combination. And I'm on the message boards as well, too. I'm going to finish this podcast. I'm going to click save and all the buttons that we have to push, and then go back to the message boards and see what's going on. See if anybody's on there saying, hey, man, Peak is being a loudmouth maniac on the first half hour of his podcast. We'll see if there's any posts like that. There might be. I don't know. Or maybe you guys are all just here. You're not even on the message boards. But I do appreciate everybody who tuned in tonight. It's been a lot of fun on the on the live stream as always. I appreciate all the super chatters. You guys came through in a big way. We appreciate that for sure. It's been a lot of fun as always. And I guess, we don't have any more post-game shows for a while. So I guess we'll be back next Wednesday night. I think so. I don't think there's a basketball game next Wednesday night, is there? Let me check the schedule real quick before we sign off. Come on, calendar. Nope. We're good. 8:30 next Wednesday night. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Panther-Lair.com. Listen, make sure you like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Panther-Lair.com. Panther-Lair.com. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. We need that. It'd be big. All right. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Hope you have a great rest of the week. We'll talk to you next Wednesday night.